Hey everybody, Dave here. As you know, we've been fortunate to have built a pretty influential audience over the years. Security leaders across the globe trust us and depend on us every day to deliver the news and analysis they need to do their jobs. And that's also why so many top security companies and hot startups trust us to connect them to the decision makers and influencers to help get the word out about their brand and fill their sales funnels. We've got lots of great sponsorship opportunities that can help you get the word out too. Just visit the cyberwire.com/sponsorship to learn more and connect with us. That's the cyberwire.com/sponsorship. Thanks. Funding for this CyberWire podcast is made possible in part by Tanium. At Tanium, they know that in a distributed world, both business operations and agencies' missions increasingly begin at the endpoint. Tanium provides unified endpoint management and security for the most demanding IT environments. Their approach decentralizes data collection, aggregation, and distribution down to the endpoint, delivering transformational scale, speed, and reliability across your distributed workforce. Learn why the Department of Defense and half of the Fortune 100 trust Tanium at Tanium.com. There are other things going on besides Solaragate and deplatforming. There's news about the Sidewinder threat actor and its interest in South Asian cyberespionage targets. Google's Project Zero describes a complex and expensive criminal effort. CISA discusses threats to cloud users and offers some security recommendations. A scam-as-a-service affiliate network spreads from Russia to Europe and North America. Awais Rashid looks at shadow security. Our own Rick Howard speaks with Christopher Alberg from Recorded Future on cyber threat intelligence. And Solar Leaks looks more like misdirection, Guccifer 2.0 style. From the CyberWire studios at Data Tribe, I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire summary for Thursday, January 14th, 2021. There are other things going on this week than Solaragate and post-riot deplatforming. We lead with those. First, AT&T Alien Labs yesterday released a report on the Sidewinder threat actor. Sidewinder is believed to have been active at least since 2012, but Alien Labs concentrates on operations since 2017. Its usual tactics include spear phishing, document exploitation, and DLL sideloading. Attribution is uncertain, but Sidewinder has been most often reported active against Pakistani military targets. The full report, which includes a list of detection methods, indicators of compromise, and a mapping to the attack framework, gives a longer list of targets, which have included government and military organizations in Pakistan, China, Nepal, and Afghanistan, with smaller operations against Myanmar, Qatar, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh. Alien Labs also assesses, with moderate confidence, that various businesses operating in the national defense technology, scientific research, financial, energy, and mineral industries of the same nations were also targeted in Sidewinder campaigns. But this picture, they stress, is incomplete, and in all probability, Sidewinder's interests extend to other targets as well. Uncertain as the attribution may be, Alien Labs thinks with low to medium confidence that Sidewinder is an Indian operation. It seems at the very least to have worked consistently in support of Indian interests. Google's Project Zero has begun a series on 0 days it's found undergoing active exploitation in the wild. This week, it describes a set of 4 that were used to craft malicious websites to entrap Windows and Android users. The campaign was sophisticated, evasive, and expensive to mount. The vulnerabilities exploited were all fixed in 2020. The discussion should lend to some urgency to applying the relevant patches. The U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency has issued a warning about successful cyber operations directed against cloud services whose users are afflicted with poor cyber hygiene. CISA's analysis report singles out 3 classes of attack for particular attention: Phishing, of course, is common. The threat actors use phishing emails whose malicious links are designed to harvest credentials for cloud service accounts. Forwarding rules also figure prominently in the threat actors' behavior. In some cases, they've modified an existing email rule to redirect emails to an account they control. In other instances, they modified existing rules to pick out certain keywords, typically financially related terms, and had emails containing them forwarded to the threat actor's account. And the threat actors also created new mailbox rules that forward certain messages to the legitimate user's RSS feeds or RSS subscription folder. This technique was intended to evade detection and consequent warning. Finally, there were instances of authentication abuse in which threat actors accessed their victims' accounts with proper multi-factor authentication. In some cases, this may have involved defeating multi-factor authentication with pass-the-cookie attacks. The threat actors also attempted, generally without success, to brute force user logins. CISA's report also includes a set of recommendations for ways in which enterprises can improve their cloud security. Isn't this just about SolarWinds, you might ask? No. CISA anticipated your question and wants its audience to understand that the report has a much broader application. CISA writes, quote, "The activity and information in this analysis report is not explicitly tied to any one threat actor or known to be specifically associated with the advanced persistent threat actor attributed with the compromise of SolarWinds Orion platform software and other recent activity." End quote. If you're using cloud services, and who isn't, take a look and read the whole, not very long, thing. Group IB this morning released a report about CISA Scam, a scam-as-a-service criminal enterprise that's selling malicious classified ads. CISA Scam began its career in 2019, and it initially confined itself to finding Russian-speaking victims on classified ad sites and other comparable online forums. Its activity peaked in mid-2020 as remote work and online shopping rose during the COVID-19 pandemic. At least 40 groups are currently running the scam. They use Telegram bots equipped with ready-to-use pages mimicking popular classifieds, marketplaces, and sometimes delivery services. 20 of the groups are at work in Russia. The other half have been found more recently, active in Bulgaria, the Czech Republic, France, Poland, Romania, the U.S., and the former Soviet republics of the near abroad. The scammers pose as both buyers and sellers, the point being to engage victims in social media, WhatsApp is popular, in order to inveigle those victims out of cash, credentials, or other valuable data. The ads that constitute the fish bait around the hooks usually offer cameras, game consoles, laptops, smartphones, and similar items for sale at deliberately low prices, Group IB says. This criminal-to-criminal service is organized as a pyramid affiliate scheme. The apex predators at the top get between 20 and 30% of the take, with the remaining 70 to 80% going to the workers down below. Group IB estimates CISA Scam took in a bit more than $6 million last year. And finally, we will end with some SolarGate notes. BankInfo Security says the SolarLeaks goons have added Microsoft and Cisco code offerings to their menu, where they join the previously noted SolarWinds and FireEye swag. Here's the current list. Stolen from Microsoft, Microsoft Windows partial source code in various Microsoft repositories, price $600,000. Taken, they say, from Cisco, multiple product source code and internal bug tracker dump going for $500,000. From SolarWinds, source code for all products, including Orion, as well as customer portal dump for $250,000. And from FireEye, Red Team tools plus source code, binaries, and documentation, these at the low price of $50,000. There's still no particular evidence that any of these offers are good, and emails to the SolarLeaks Proton Mail account are still bouncing. Cisco, for one, says it's had nothing stolen, and FireEye, which first detected the SolarWinds backdoor, says it's found no evidence that SolarLeaks actually has anything at all. So this looks increasingly like misdirection, something along the lines of Guccifer 2.0. We'll see whether the imposter has legs. It probably won't. It's been tried before, and people are wiser to this sort of thing. Anyway. And now, a word from our sponsor, ExtraHop, securing modern business with cloud-native network detection and response. The massive shift to remote work has turned the reality of work on its head. With cloud and multi-cloud adoption, comprehensive visibility is more important than ever. But in order to protect your business, you need more than unified visibility. You need intelligence response workflows so teams can collaborate easily and act quickly. ExtraHop helps organizations like Wizards of the Coast detect threats up to 95% faster. As John Kreese, senior IT engineer, puts it, quote, ExtraHop is helping us accelerate cloud adoption by ensuring our workloads are secure. See how it works in the full product demo, free and no forms required, at extrahop.com/cyber. That's extrahop.com/cyber. And we thank ExtraHop for sponsoring our show. Our CyberWire chief analyst and chief security officer Rick Howard has been making the rounds, checking in with experts on cyber threat intelligence. He files this report.
I've been doing cyber threat intelligence, or CTI, in one form or the other for the past 20 years. When I got the chance to talk to Christopher Alberg, I jumped on it.
No worries at all.
I won't touch anything from now on.
Let's get started.
Dr. Alberg has been the CEO of Recorded Future since 2009, and the CyberWire co-produces a podcast with his company called Inside Security Intelligence that our very own Dave Bittner hosts. Dr. Alberg and I talked about the changes to cyber threat intelligence over the years, and I asked him about the skill sets needed for today's intelligence teams.
Intel analysts, computer scientists, data scientists, which, sort of at some level are data analysts, but, more numbers-oriented data scientists. And then finally, maybe even, which is important, sort of the big data operations, because sort of Recorded Future runs on thousands and thousands of machines at, some outsourced data center. So actually managing that becomes a science in itself. But now you could have those four groups and they never talk to each other and it's not going to be any good. So you need to be able to build analytical processes in that. The good news with Intel people is that they're very comfortable with sort of uncertainty. They're very comfortable with, fuzzy problems.
Dr. Alberg recommended a book that explains the character of intelligence analysts that he is looking for. It's not a techie book or a how-to book on being an Intel analyst. It is a business book written by Danny Meyer, the guy that founded one of my favorite hamburger joints, Shake Shack. The book is called Setting the Table.
And he talks about 51%ers, and the 51%ers are those people who are all about providing great service, and then 49% about their specific expertise. And it's the same thing here. We look for the people who are inherently collaborative, inherently want to work cross silos, cross-functional, the people who are just dying to work with others. And those are and don't really have the time for the divas who doesn't want to do that. So when you find those people they're still pretty damn good in their 49%, but they're 51% about, pulling things together. That's where you find that magic.
We talked about how no two Intel teams are exactly the same.
What's the problem you're trying to solve? And that's a hard thing to do, but you have to actually try to understand that. Are you trying to help somebody inform their patching process? Are you trying to help somebody be more efficient at doing incident response? Are you trying to help somebody more, make that SOC, tier one analyst in the SOC be more efficient at doing XYZ? Whatever the sort of the problem you're trying to do, or, higher level constructs than that, what sort of analysis do you need to do? What sort of automated correlations do you need to provide for? Understand the problem and be disciplined about that so that when you then if you don't succeed, you can tune the analytics, tune what data you need to add, tune whatever you're doing. So you really think about it as an analytical process. And actually, I think a lot of people learned in the intelligence community can be put to work here, but it needs to be more data-driven. And people are not thinking enough about that.
From my perspective, the commercial CTI offerings are still stuck on reporting technical artifacts versus reporting on how to stop the success of an adversary campaign.
We always had this idea that, the reason we're indexing all this data and organizing it is to understand real-world activity. And so that means that, sometimes, of course, you're going to be looking at IPs and domains and net flow in between them and, down in the weeds. But at the same time, you want to try to understand not only sort of threat actors at the realm of talking about APT28 or, Potter Panda or whatever their names might be. There's obviously a big sort of debate whether attribution matters or not. But even if you don't believe that attribution matters, I do think that intents matter. I do think that, understanding these things holistically matters.
I love cyber threat intelligence. It is so fascinating. And if you are looking for an interesting and exciting career, CTI is a great field. And while you're thinking about it, check out the Recorded Future podcast on threat intelligence. You can find it at cyberwire.com/podcast.
That's the CyberWire's Rick Howard. And now a message from our sponsor, CyberReason. If you're a defender fighting to protect your organization from the dark forces of cyber attackers, it might seem attackers have the advantage. To win, they only need to be successful once. As a cyber defender, you must be successful in ending attacks every single time. CyberReason reverses the attacker's advantage. They put the power back in your hands. Their future-ready attack platform gives defenders the wisdom to uncover, understand, and piece together multiple threats, and the precision focus to end cyber attacks instantly on computers, mobile devices, servers, and the cloud. Wherever your organization is being threatened, CyberReason is ready to win the battle against cyber attacks, with you and for you. Join them and the world's leading companies. Together, we are the defenders. CyberReason. End cyber attacks. From endpoints to everywhere. Learn more at cyberreason.com. And joining me once again is Professor Awais Rashid. He's the director of the National Research Center on Privacy, Harm Reduction, and Adversarial Influence Online at the University of Bristol. Professor Rashid, it's great to have you back. I want to touch today on shadow security. And I think certainly as we are several months into COVID and the shift to everyone or many people working from home, it's a more important topic than ever.
Absolutely. And, shadow security is where individuals or groups start to bring in what would be non-standard security tools or practices to actually undertake security as part of their work. And usually this becomes quite significant. And often shadow security and generally shadow IT, as the term is known, is frowned upon, because that means that people are actually utilizing IT systems or security tools and mechanisms that are not within the regular IT or security infrastructure of the organization. And the first tendency can often be to say, well, that's actually very bad and you mustn't do this. And of course, we want to avoid shadow practices where we can, but there is another way of looking at this. And that the question we must ask is, why this shadow practice is going on in the first instance? It basically means that what we have in place is not working effectively enough, that people have to resort to shadow practices. And this also comes in terms of shadow security. And it could well be that, for example, they're deploying shadow security because they can't update particular things on their systems that would actually allow them to work in more secure ways. It could also be that there are legacy systems in place and they have to think about more secure ways of dealing with data or information and so on and so forth. So instead of asking the question, and certainly that's what I always say to people, that if you observe shadow practice, the first question you must ask is, why is this taking place in the first instance? Because there must be a good reason, because ultimately people want to get on with the job that they have at hand, and they usually would try and deploy things that will actually enable them to get on with the job that they have at hand. And that's really typically where shadow practices start to emerge.
But don't we find ourselves in a kind of a complex situation here where because so many people have shifted to work from home, there may be security elements that their home ISP is providing for them that they may not even be aware of. And as someone in charge of security for an organization, how do you take inventory of all of those possibilities that are out there now?
That is a wonderful question. And I mean, this is a question that has been, asked for nearly now 6 to 9 months since there has been this kind of big shift to working from home. And I think the question that needs to be asked is, people are now working in a very different setting, and as an organizational IT department and also a security department, how are we actually enabling people to do their work? So if for example, we are requiring that people must communicate using a very, very kind of secure communication mechanism, and it doesn't actually work with their home router. For instance, in the first instance, they may resort to, for example, using online messaging platforms like WhatsApp because they may think, well, okay, it's end-to-end encrypted and I'm actually getting on with my job. And one of the things that we did very early on in this, and a number of my colleagues worked on this, was to look at as to what would be good practice with regards to security and remote working. And then the question then comes is that if, this is the sort of conversation that you are quite willing to have, say, sitting in a crowded coffee shop where you are not, concerned about, being overheard, then, it is effectively not very confidential conversation at all, right? So basically, any reasonable online platform will do to do that kind of conversation. If it's a conversation you expect to have in a closed meeting room within your organization, then you must consider, what are the various security properties of the various platforms and things like that. But also, if it is really supposed to be a big, sort of corporate confidential information, then you really, really need to think about, what are the practices that need to be in place, who needs to be there, what kind of identity management you are doing, and things like that. And I think the key here is that we are now in that landscape where we are actually utilizing, a very, very diverse infrastructure, in people's homes to carry on our daily jobs. And security departments and IT services have to also now start to think about as to how do they actually operate in that kind of setting. What tools are they providing? Are there good VPN services? Is there good accessibility of online platforms and services where people can do their work securely? How easy to use and access they are? And do they require lots of complex configurations on parts of the users? So we are back here to one of my favorite topics, which is, reducing the burden of security on the user. And, in this kind of remote working sense, when we are all under great pressures, I think it's really important that we think about how do we reduce that burden so that people can do their job and not having to resort to shadow security practices simply to get on with what they're doing.
All right. Well, Professor Awais Rashid, thanks for joining us. Thanks to all of our sponsors for making the CyberWire possible. And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. And for professionals and cybersecurity leaders who want to stay abreast of this rapidly evolving field, sign up for CyberWire Pro. It'll save you time and keep you informed beyond your dreams. Listen for us on your Alexa smart speaker, too. The CyberWire podcast is proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. Our amazing CyberWire team is Elliot Peltzman, Guru Prakash, Kelsey Bond, Tim Nodar, Joe Kerrigan, Carol Terrio, Ben Yellen, Nick Valecki, Gina Johnson, Bennett Moe, Chris Russell, John Petrick, Jennifer Iben, Rick Howard, Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here tomorrow. In the turbulent security space that's filled with overhyped solutions and empty promises, Red Canary breaks through with radical transparency and a laser focus on delivering outcomes. They are relentless in their vision to create a world where every organization can achieve its mission without fear of cyber attacks. Great security operations depend on detection and response capabilities that reduce the time attackers can spend in your network. That means having detailed visibility and broad detection in the places where they operate, your endpoints, your network, and your cloud environments. Red Canary is passionate about improving outcomes, not just for their customers, but for the entire community. You see that passion in the content they deliver and via their open source projects like Atomic Red Team. At the end of the day, Red Canary is your security ally. See what it's like to have a partner in the fight. Visit redcanary.com today. And we thank Red Canary for sponsoring our show.